Last week I spent about 35 minutes arguing with someone who wasn't in the room, chat. Not even a little bit, not like a passing thought where I went, oh, I should have said this and moved on. I mean a full-blown argument. I had my opening position. I had their counter arguments, which, I wrote. By the way, I cast them in this thing. I had the escalation. The part where it gets personal, the moment where I said exactly the right thing at exactly the right time. Nobody else was there. It was entirely in my head. And at the end of it all, I was genuinely upset. Like physiologically. Elevated heart rate. That specific kind of agitation that usually only follows a real conversation that went somewhere it shouldn't have gone. Like it went left for something that didn't happen. And then I sat with that for a second and thought, this is Ragebait. Like I made content specifically engineered to provoke an emotional response. And then I consumed it. And I had exactly the reaction it was designed to produce. Except I was both the creator and the audience. And the whole loop was just me. And then I thought, maybe I should make a video about this. Which is either insight or it's more of the same thing. We'll find out. So let's talk about overthinking, because I think we've been using that word wrong. And I don't mean in a, well, actually way. I just mean when most people say overthinking, they mean thinking a lot. And those are not the same thing. Thinking a lot is just called thinking. You can spend 3 hours on something and come out with more clarity than you had going in. More direction, a decision you actually feel good about. That's not overthinking. That's working something out. That's the brain doing exactly what it's supposed to do. We're actually talking about when we say overthinking, the real thing is rumination. And rumination is different. Rumination is when you are cycling through the same material on a loop repetitively. And every time you complete the loop, you are not farther along than when you started. You're just still there, still in it. There's a researcher named Susan Nolan Hoeksema. She spent decades studying this specifically. And what the research shows is that rumination doesn't solve problems. It amplifies them. The anxiety you walked in with gets louder, gets larger, gets bigger, gets heavier. Depression seems heavier. You feel more down. You feel more upset. You feel more lethargic. Whatever feeling started the loop, by the time you run it back 40 times, you don't just have that feeling anymore. You have that feeling plus the weight of having felt it 40 times. And here's the part that gets me. Here's the part I had to sit with when I actually started paying attention to my own patterns. Rumination feels like work, guys. It feels productive. It feels like you are actively doing something about the problem because it's effortful. It takes energy. Your brain is running. Things are happening. You're engaged with the material. But you're not going anywhere. It's the mental equivalent of being on a treadmill and thinking you're traveling. You're tired at the end. You're sweating. You put in the effort. You did not move. I didn't fully clock this in myself until probably my mid-20s. And mind you, I'm 28. So put that in perspective. And even then, it took someone naming it to me directly for it to register. Because when you're inside of the loop, it doesn't feel like a loop. It feels like thinking. It feels necessary. It feels like if you stop, if you just let go of the thing you're running back and forth, something bad is going to happen that you could have prevented. And that feeling of necessity is the trap. That what makes it so hard to interrupt. Because the question you have to ask yourself, and this is a hard question, is not, am I thinking about this a lot? The question is, am I actually moving through this? Or am I just living inside it? And if you have to think about that question for a long time before you can answer it, well, I'll let you sit with that. Now, everybody, take a deep breath, because we're about to get deeper. Okay, so kind of been beating around the bush, so I want to introduce the actual thing. Because overthinking and rumination, that's the foundation. That's the ground we need to establish. But what I've personally been experiencing, what I think a lot of people are experiencing without having language for it, is something more specific than that. Let me tell you what Ragebait is, because the word is kind of a buzzword right now, but I want to make sure we are all working from the same definition. Ragebait is content, specifically engineered content. The entire purpose of it is to provoke an outsized emotional response in whoever is consuming it. Not because the emotional response is valuable or useful to the person feeling it, but because that reaction generates engagement, clicks, comments, shares. The algorithm eats it. The creator benefits. You leave angrier than you arrived, and somewhere a view counter went up. That's Ragebait. Now, what happens when you are the creator and the audience simultaneously? What happens when the content is generated inside your own head, distributed to yourself, consumed by yourself, and the engagement loop, the reaction, the agitation, the physiological response is entirely internal? What is that called? That is self-ragebait. And I know it sounds kind of funny, it sounds a little absurd, but part of it is the absurdity is real, and I'm not going to pretend it isn't. But stay with me for a second, because the mechanism underneath is not funny at all. Your brain has a threat detection system. Most of you have heard of the amygdala at some point. It's the part of your brain that processes fear, threat, emotional memory. And here's the thing about the amygdala that matters for this conversation. It's not fully distinguish, that's a hard word, I'm sorry, y'all, between a real threat and a vividly imagined one. Well, this is why horror movies work. Nothing is actually trying to hurt you. You're sitting in a chair in the comfort of your living room at a movie theater with your friends. You're completely safe, and your nervous system is responding like something is wrong because your brain is processing the imagery as if it might be real. This is why intrusive thoughts are disturbing because we all have them. And sometimes they leak out and sometimes you say them out loud. But sometimes they're internal intrusive thoughts. Not because they reflect what you actually want or intend, but because the brain registers the image in response to it before the rational part of you can step in and contextualize it. So when you spend 35 minutes running a full argument in your head, one you wrote, one you directed, one where you cast the other person and gave them their lines, your body treats it approximately like it happened. The cortisol response is real. The elevated heart rate is real. The specific agitation that follows, the one that feels exactly like the aftermath of a real confrontation, that is real. You just spent genuine emotional and physiological resources on content you produced and distributed to yourself. That is not a metaphor. That is the literal sequence of events. And I want to be honest. This isn't just a theoretical observation for me. This is something I've had to sit with about my own patterns. And I'm going to get into that specifically. But before I do, here's what self-Ragebait actually costs you. It's not just the 35 minutes. It's not just the agitation that follows. It's the fact that you walked into that loop with a certain amount of emotional bandwidth, a certain amount of capacity for the actual day, the actual people, the actual situations in front of you, and you spent some of it on absolutely nothing, on content you made up. And the day that doesn't give you that back, that's the part that started bothering me the most. Not that I was doing it, but of what I was giving up to do it. Let's all breathe. I know that was heavy. Let's breathe for a second. Let's breathe. All right. So I want to make a distinction here because this is important and I think it's the part that actually changes how you deal with it. Self-Ragebait gets confused with other things, and I understand why. There's overlap. There are moments where they kind of run into each other, but the mechanisms are very different. And if you try to address the wrong mechanism, you're going to work on the wrong part of the problem. It's like working out a muscle group, but you are doing the wrong workout for that muscle group. Let's talk about self-sabotage first. Self-sabotage is behavioral. It's when you take an action or deliberately avoid taking an action that works directly against something you're trying to build. You have a goal, you know you have a goal, and something in you, some part of that process undermines it right when it matters most. I know what that looks like. I watch myself do it. You have a deadline, and instead of working on the thing, you reorganize your entire workspace. You have a conversation you need to have, and you find 17 reasons why today isn't the right day. You're about to do the thing that matters, and suddenly everything adjacent to the thing feels urgent. That's behavioral, something you do. Imposter syndrome is cognitive. It's a persistent belief. And I want to emphasize belief because that's what makes it so hard to shake. That you don't actually deserve the success you have or the position you're in. That you got here by accident. That everyone around you has real credentials and real competence, and eventually someone is going to look closely enough to figure out that you don't and you're not all that. And the insidious thing about imposter syndrome specifically is that it scales with success. The more you accomplish, the louder it gets. Because now there's a little bit more to lose. Now the gap between what you built and what you believe about yourself feels even wider. That's cognitive, something you believe. Self-Ragebait is neither of those things. It's not behavioral because you're not taking an action that undermines a goal. Nothing external is happening. You're not avoiding anything. You're not doing anything in the world. It's not cognitive in the imposter syndrome sense because it's not a belief you hold about yourself or your worth or your credentials. Self-Ragebait is experiential. It's an experience. Let's just say that. It's an experience. It's something you feel in full with real physiological weight without anything actually happening to generate it. You're not responding to a threat. You're manufacturing one and responding to your own production. And the reason the distinction matters practically and not just conceptually is that different mechanisms need different responses. If you treat self-Ragebait like self-sabotage, you're going to go looking for a behavior to change. You're going to audit your actions, build systems, create accountability structures. And those things aren't wrong in other contexts, but the loop isn't a behavior. You can't habit stack. Shout out Atomic Habits. You can't habit stack your way out of an imaginary argument. If you treat it like imposter syndrome, you're going to restructure your beliefs. Affirmations, evidence gathering, reminding yourself of what you built and why you belong here. And again, not wrong in other contexts, but the loop doesn't care about your evidence. You can have a full wall of proof that you are capable and still spend 35 minutes fighting someone who isn't there. The reason naming it accurately matters is because self-Ragebait requires a different first step. Not changing what you do, not changing what you believe, but creating distance from what you're experiencing while you're experiencing it, which is its own thing entirely. And it's harder than it sounds because the whole nature of the loop is that when you're inside it, it doesn't feel like a loop. It feels like reality. It feels urgent. It feels like something that needs to be resolved right now. And the first move, the only move that actually creates any space, is recognition. Not fixing it, not stopping it, not talking yourself out of it with logic, just seeing for what it is while it's happening. I made this. This is mine, and I'm in it right now. That's the beginning. It's not the cure, but it's the beginning. And I want to be honest about something before we go any further. I've been talking about this like I have some elevated perspective on it, like I'm outside looking in. I'm not. I'm the person who spent 35 minutes last week arguing with somebody. Plot twist, I know. And I have a psychology degree. So let's talk about that. I want to ask myself something out loud, and I want to ask it genuinely because I think it's a fair question, and I think you might be asking it too. Who am I to talk about this? Because going back to imposter syndrome, do I have the credentials? Am I qualified to talk about this? Well, I have a psychology degree. Bachelor of Science, and I also have a minor in sociology. So my major was psychology. My minor was sociology. Not clinical. I'm not a therapist. I can't diagnose you. That's not what this is. What the degree gave me was fluency with the research, the vocabulary, the vernacular, the framework for understanding why the brain does what it does. And I still... ironically enough, spent 35 minutes last week arguing with a person who was not there. So let's talk about it. I have ADHD and I have a bipolar 1 diagnosis. One, I'm kind of actively in the process of having reevaluated because the way it presents has shifted significantly over the years. What started as massive anxiety and depression, genuinely debilitating hospitalization level, evolved into something that got labeled one way and is feeling more like something else now, less manic than the diagnosis implies, more anxious, more like a low hum under everything that occasionally gets very loud. I'm in the middle of figuring that out. I don't have the answer on it yet, but here's what I do know. The ADHD means my attention latches. It finds something, a half-finished conversation, a perceived slight, a version of how something should have gone. It doesn't release it just because I decide I'm done. That's not willpower. That's not discipline. That's just how the regulation works for me, which is differently than it works for a lot of people. And the emotional layer on top of that means whatever I'm cycling through isn't neutral. What might be passing frustration for someone else is a full internal production for me. Full cast, full runtime. Which, saying it out loud, explains a lot about why I make YouTube videos. For the longest time, I thought the loop was a character flaw. That I was failing at something other people found easy, that if I was more disciplined, more intentional, more focused, I could just stop it from starting. And I beat myself up about it over the years using that framing. That framing is incorrect. It's wrong. That is not a discipline problem. It never was. It's a pattern with roots, neurological, experiential, years of anxiety and depression and diagnosis and re-diagnosis, and beating yourself up about it from inside the loop just gives the new loop new material. Understanding that doesn't make the pattern stop. I want to be honest about that, but it changes the relationship you have with it when it starts. And changing that relationship is, I think, the most honest thing I can offer here. Let me tell you where I have landed. I don't have a cure for this. I want to be clear about that because I think a lot of content that sounds like this, that walks you through the concept, names the mechanism, explains the why, implies a resolution at the end, like the naming was building towards something. Like, now that you can understand it, you can fix it. I can't give you that because I don't have it. I've tried things, some of them evidence-based, some of them were vibes with a confident delivery. And the honest result is I still do it less sometimes in certain seasons when I'm regulated and rested and not carrying too much at once. The loop starts less and I catch it faster. And then there are weeks like last week. I wasn't myself this past week. I want to say that pretty plainly. There were conversations and situations in a therapy session on Friday that made it clear that I had gotten very far inside the loop, far enough that people around me could see it before I could. And that's a specific kind of disorienting, to find out you've been somewhere you didn't realize you were. Sitting down to make this video was part of finding my way back out. The only thing that has ever created any real distance, not a cure, just enough space to see it from outside for a second, is naming it accurately. Not I'm in my head or not I'm anxious, but I am producing content specifically designed to provoke a stress response in myself. I am the creator and the audience. The loop is mine. I made it and I'm in it right now. That's the whole thing. It doesn't stop the loop. I want to be honest about that. But it creates enough distance to see it as something that's happening rather than a reality you're just inside of. You stop being the subject for a second and become the observer. Sometimes, not always, not even most of the time, that's enough to interrupt it. You cannot think your way out from the inside. The trying to stop it becomes part of it. The frustration with yourself for doing it again becomes the new material. That's the loop continuing under a different name. The exit isn't a thought. It's a moment of seeing. You might still argue with people who aren't there. I definitely will. But maybe us both will catch you a little sooner. Thank you. I'll see y'all on the stream. I'll link it down below. Have a nice day.